I assume that's
Whew.
someone else, but in case it's me, I'm ready to go.
It's you. Here we're coming off in five. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I'm Santita Jackson, and even though I have a smile in my voice, a smile on my face, it's because of the man who I'm with, this brilliant economist, Dr. Max Wolf, who's been with us. This brilliant professor, he's been with us. So he's been with me. We've been together a long time, Max.
Yeah, yeah.
A long time, and he has such a brilliant mind. And I appreciate the fact that you want everyone to do well. That having been said, today everybody is very, very uneasy, very
Yeah.
upset. These tariffs that have been imposed by the Trump administration have frightened everybody to death. The stocks went off the cliff today. I wonder if they will recover. Dr. Jeffrey Sachs says that everyone will be poorer, people will lose their jobs, we're going to have higher prices, budget deficits, that we will, in fact, not be winning. The American people will be losing. Markets all over the world have been rattled. People are saying all over the world, America is not a dependable partner. Is is the economy going to be tanked? What is going on? Did you pay attention to your 401k today? Huh? What is happening? What is a tariff?
Sure.
And why now? We'll talk with you with Dr. Maxwell if I can't even get it out. Please everybody, meet me on Blue Sky. SantitaJackson.bsky.social. I'm on X at SantitaJ. I am on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel right now. Like and share, like and share, like and share. And the Santita Jackson and Friends Facebook page. That's the only page where I can get friends, everybody. So please, please, like, thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. Dr. Max Wolf, brilliant economist. Oh my goodness. What is happening today? I was even seeing a TikTok. Well, that maybe this was all a figment of chat GPT. I don't know. What is this? What is a tariff? Why has it been imposed now? Dow, S&P 500, NASDAQ have had the worst days since 2020, since COVID.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
I'm not sick of winning yet, but we were told we were told that we might win so much we'd be sick of winning, and I feel like that's been pushed off a few days here. So that's the good news, relatively good news. Look, the a global economy is a system of interdependences, and the United States has been chief among the sort of nations of the world for 75 years or so, and we've built an empire on a globalization model. We've helped others to find the wisdom, sometimes at the end of a bayonet. So often we were quite persuasive, above and beyond the normal chit chat. The sort of occasionally the gun to the head inspiration was pulled out over the
Sure.
years. Maybe not just once or twice, and consult the history there. But this is the sort of global order that we built. There are things wrong with it. There are lots of points of concern. Those are real. There are real environmental issues. There are real equity issues. There are real social justice issues. There are real issues about who gets what and distribution. All true. But this is the system that we built that made us rich and kept us rich in the United States. Not all of us, of course, not most of us, maybe, but at least a few of us. And the idea here is that this is the order, this is Pax Americana, this is the American Empire, was built this way. And this is the system that feeds, clothes, shelters, and medicates 8 billion people. So it's a little bit dangerous to play that game with it. Now, it doesn't feed them equally, it doesn't feed them all well. Maybe it doesn't feed them the food it should, but this is how they get fed, right? So the way I'd say it is there's lots of good critiques here, but if your neighbor really wants to move and you hope that they can and they don't, burning their house down may not be the best way to get them to find the new house that's just right for them. And that's a little bit what we've done here. We've burned down someone else's house, actually our own to some extent, to force change. It's a little bit the model that you see in some of the Doge related realignments in the federal employment, in terms of folks who work for the government. And yeah, there's a hunger for change. There's an anger at the system. Both those things make sense, and they sometimes come from a smart and reasonable place, even a humanitarian type of impulse. But this is the system that feeds us, clothes us, and produces and distributes the wealth that we live on. So most folks are timid about randomly taking a buzzsaw to certain parts of it, but we don't live under most folks right now. We live under different folks. And the folks we live under now, and I always feel uncomfortable doing this, if we're going to impose rationality and planning here, we're going to say they're rational and they planned this. And that's a not as sure thing. That's not as much of a slam dunk as I'd like it to be. But let's say it's true. They've decided that the world order that we built to enrich us isn't working for us right now as well as it once did. Okay, there's a lot of sentiment around that area in the United States. Um, I'm not sure how much it makes sense, right? But whatever, there's anger and there are some righteous reasons for some of it. So they've decided to tear it down and by commandment rebuild the world economy instantaneously through bullying. And they've done what bullies do, which is pick more on the weak in the hope to sell it and assume that folks won't fight back. Problem is, they're already fighting back in a much more planned way than our assault.
Mm.
So when you start hitting people with tariffs, which are just taxes on imports, that's it. It's just a tax. It's a tax on something coming into the United States, a good or a service. By the way, we seem to have forgotten to calculate the service economy in our trade numbers that we shared with the world yesterday. Um, why you might be interested in that is the service economy is larger than the goods economy. So, you skipped something, like you forgot the bread on your sandwich. So the sort of most discerning among us will notice that you're just eating a piece of ham with your fingers. So yeah, there was a little bit of a calculation issue that was fairly obvious to those burdened by the dismal science, such as myself, I suppose. So that was a bit weird. But that notwithstanding, we just decided to jack up taxes on other people in the hope that they'll pay them, one, not pass them along to the American consumer, which is unambiguously a lot of what they're going to do, right? So that's an issue. And then we also assumed that they wouldn't be angry and fight back, or if they did, we would just escalate it, right? And so that's the plan right now. I think it's already been enough of a spectacular misadventure that the president himself is suggesting he will renegotiate these, which is a good sign and a compromising impulse. I would mention he didn't negotiate them initially, but he will now renegotiate them possibly. And the way they were calculated has come into some scrutiny, so perhaps they'll be calculated in a different way. But this is this is playing around with your already messed up ability to get a job, keep a job, and afford the things you buy. That's really what's in play here. How does America relate to the world, and how able are you to keep your job, get a job, and afford things? Last thing I'll tell you in the oversimplification here is we can't make many of the things in the United States or many of our exports without imports. So it's not so flat, right? So if you want to make things, you have to import things to make those things, whether those are goods or services. And then the last thing is that by snubbing the rest of the world like this on this sort of weird chest pound, we seem to have forgotten a few things. Now I'm going to repeat a few of them for you. So we owe the rest of the world $4.5 trillion. Our government does.
Say
And
that one more time. We
we
what?
owe the rest of the world a little bit more, actually, if you sum it up, than $5 trillion, so $5,000 billion. So this is a little bit like when you got serious about telling the bank how it's going to be. There's a possibility it won't go that well when you walk into the bank with your megaphone and be like, "You guys really stink, and this is how it's going to be going forward with what I'm going to be doing with the line of credit you've given me." There's always the possibility that that fellow in the office with the bulletproof glass has a slightly different theory of how the world should go, and things can go funky there. But we also import a lot of our food, things like coffee and chocolate and toilet paper, right? It does harken back to the good old days of Trump 1 when everybody was sitting in their house waiting to die of an infectious disease and wiping themselves with the coffee filter. So if that was the sort of moment of potency we're looking to regain, we edged closer to it today. But yeah, this is a major blow to the way people feed and clothe and trade and medicate and house themselves, because it's a major hit to the global economy. Again, and that could change quickly. Often he does make quick revisions to policies. So it's possible this will be redone 3 more times before the middle of this month.
Will people trust us?
They already don't. So I mean, to if we're fair, we've already given them enough evidence that's not a good idea, and we're giving them these reminders. The thing I tell you is another form of tax that Americans don't understand is chaos. Chaos is the enemy of prosperity.
Mm.
Show me a place in chaos, and I'll show you a place that's suffering want. Okay. Even a bad reality that I can plan around is better most of the time as a business person than a chaos. Chaos is a tax because if I don't know what tomorrow brings, I have to hold more money back. I have to hire less people. I have to expand less, right? I have to be stressed. I have to be afraid of opportunities because I don't know if I'll be able to stand behind them. And so a chaotic environment is not a good environment for business, full stop. Chaos, enemy of prosperity. And I don't think we'll see these as the final numbers because it's not so clear how they were calculated. But we'll see final numbers that are threatening to global trade and prosperity for sure. How much is a little bit more TBD.
How do these tariffs work? Because we're seeing that everything has been thrown into disarray. Just the the anticipation of the announcement of Liberation Day. You've got to explain that concept to me. Had
I'll
the
leave
whole
that to someone
world.
else.
You got to explain it to me. I mean, because Liberation Day, I was like, liberated from what? What are you talking about? First of all, when he says liberation, what is he talking about?
I mean, I don't want to be unfair to the guy. I'm sure there's an interesting thought process in that team somewhere, but I don't think it was explained. I think liberation from foreign affliction is sort of implied. Look, I do think governments historically, right and left, American and foreign, love the idea that if you're suffering, it's a foreigner's fault because foreigners generally don't vote. And so blaming things on people who can't vote is forever in vogue by all parties of all sight, right? Um, but I think the idea is that he's a savior. He likes to be seen that way, and that
As
he's
a
the only
savior?
yes, and he's the only one who can stand up to such powerhouses as Bangladesh and Vietnam with their bullying trade practices. Yeah. So obviously, just sick of the Bangladeshi dominance of the American economy, and no one else had the courage to. It's like the trans teens, it's a powerful group, and not everyone has the courage to stand up to those kids wearing different clothes in high school because it's a powerful bunch. Yeah, look, some of this you need somebody with a different expertise. My expertise stops way before the answer to that. The economics part of it that's maybe more interesting is this sort of traditional elites in the United States. He's interested in weakening them, perhaps because they might not be supportive of him. He has his own constituency. And look, what I would say as an economist is sometimes people are so angry they don't care what they do, and the power isn't breaking things. And then when that happens, the societies fracture along their divisions. So they tend to fracture in orgies of rage against the people they feel entitled to mistreat. And that's maybe why you see so much anger directed at people of color and women this time, because those are kind of the usual suspects in American history. And then foreigners, and there's a long history, 100-year history, of blaming foreigners when you can. There's a nativist movement here that's been here, and most countries have it for a long time. I think maybe more interesting, and some of your listeners have commented on this too, is were we to bring back these things, okay, these manufacturing, I'm sure there'll be some return, but not much. So that's mostly not true. But if we were going to do it, it'll be done by robots. And the people who work there will be relatively few to the production. And the people who work in those places will be engineers and coders.
Well, hold that thought, because I saw the Commerce Secretary in an interview
Uh
earlier
oh.
today, and he said these jobs are coming back. We've got these commitments from Apple and other corporations, and we're going to be hiring mechanics to repair the machines.
Sure, that's true. I
And
mean,
everything was about the machine. I said, but that means jobs are not coming back because the machines will be doing the work. They'll be repair persons, right?
sure, well, we're not going to be able to export it because if you cut off other people's ability to export to you with tariffs, they return the favor nearly instantly. So that's, remember, that's why people have historically been nervous about sacrificing the other small population outside the US. So it's really only about 95.4% of the total population lives outside the US. So, to some of us coastal elite types, that seems like a lot. So you have that issue. Even if you do it on a GDP basis, the United States has about 18% of world GDP. So it's say 82% outside the US. That is where the growth is. Yeah. The other thing is that all these removals of the social safety net
Yeah.
and stuff actually make us poorer. So the few people left here in the insane asylum with us have less dough. Yeah. So look, there are some reasons that this hasn't been a popular choice, right? It's very hard to get economists right, left, and center to agree on something, but he did with these tariffs, much the way he got Japan, South Korea, and China to stand together, which has not much happened in a couple thousand years on anything. Or he rebuilt the European Union based mostly on animosity toward the US. I mean, in a way, he is a uniter, in a way, probably unanticipated with these tariffs. But I think, look, in fairness, people are angry. They want the world to change, often for good reason, and some people care more about how it changes, and some people are just at their wits' end or just angry, or, if it's hard, it's sometimes the only way to know you made a difference in the world is to break something, I guess.
How will this spur job loss?
I mean, it
And
probably is
price
already.
rises? Yeah, how will that, how does that work?
Well, I mean, the United States, for instance, exports quite a bit, right? We produce and
Mhm.
export cars and many other things, oil, etc. And our exports will meet with less good of a market. Let me give you an example. One of the most downloaded apps for iOS in the last few weeks in Western Europe has been an app where you scan a product and it tells you if it's American made or it has an American parent company, so you
Oh,
can not buy it, right? And
really?
yeah, however people may feel about that, that translates into potential employment losses in the US, right? Our farmers, like when people go after American goods, right? The other thing is, look, the American public, again, there's always very wealthy people. This isn't everyone, but the American public in general has had a hard time paying the rising cost of many basic things, rents, motor vehicles, food, among others, the other things too, university tuitions, medical bills, blah, 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 blah. And if all things being equal, you now have to spend 20% more because that's the sort of average tariff impact for the things you bought, you have 20% less money. You just got a 20% pay cut, right? And lots of people also work in businesses that import things.
So when we are
So
looking,
they're going to get fired too. Yeah, there'll be a lot more job losses from this, even than the heavy job losses we've already seen from the direct firings of government employees. And so I would just remind people, if you fire the people who provide services to people, and then you jack up the number of people who need those services, you have a head-on collision in the economy, right? You have more need is out there and less provision to that need, and then
Mhm.
more need and then less provision to that need. And yeah, America runs on imported money too, and those people aren't loaning us money because they love us. They're loaning us money because we can't buy their stuff if we don't. So if you announce, "Hey, I'm not going to buy your stuff anymore," one of the things that they'll explore intellectually is, "Okay, then I won't loan you all that money to buy my stuff." Right? So, I mean, the easiest way for me to tell you all this stuff, which might be confusing, is we are interdependent. When we are afraid of our interdependence and we lash out, we are slashing the seats in a movie, but it's a drive-in movie, right? And so it doesn't work. It feels good on an anger level. I get it. But it doesn't work well because we don't really actually have an American economy and a Chinese economy and an EU economy. We have a globalized economy, and those are different pieces of dirt. And our money and our elites move around in a nearly borderless world. And so they're a little bit less affected. Those of us who are not so wealthy, we're stuck more or less on a piece of dirt, right? And so the piece of dirt kind of matters to us, but not that much. And not as much as you think, because your electricity might come from Canada, your coffee comes from Brazil, the sugar in it comes from somewhere else, your clothes come from somewhere else, Your couch comes from somewhere else.
Mhm.
Your sneakers come from somewhere else. Your car comes, at least in part, probably from somewhere else, right? So I mean, like, before you've left your house, if you're not naked and experiencing a throbbing headache from caffeine withdrawal, you've already been in the global economy. When you borrow on a credit card with a balance, you're playing around with global savings because we don't have much savings. Like, we're so integrated that we're now doing an uninformed, crude job of answering problems from 30 and 40 years ago. The problem is the world didn't stay still, moved forward. Last piece is that a lot of what we import is what's called interfirm trade. So people
Which
don't
is,
understand that, which is American firms have foreign subsidiaries
mhm.
that produce stuff and then comes back into the United States. So some of this activity is occurring inside our own businesses. Like when Nike produces in Vietnam,
Yeah.
that the deficit we have with Vietnam and footwear or something, which is substantial, right, for a small economy, like that is actually a lot of that takes place inside Nike or other shoe company, other athletic clothing and athletic footwear clothing and clothing and accessories companies, right? So it's not like this idea of like two armies on a field and stuff. It's nice, but it's hokey, outdated, and was largely never correct. By the way, if you work for Nike, you've got a lot more in common with that production worker in Vietnam than you do with the guy with the pickup truck and all the flags on it next door.
Why is that?
Well, first of all, he's not going to pay your rent. And second of all, you're selling sneakers that were made there. And the budget to pay you, as much as you're probably getting paid for advertisement and retail, comes from making the shoes for 48 cents.
Do we know how dependent upon how interdependent we are in the world? That is how
No.
dependent upon we are on other economies. Because I get the sense that Americans believe, because we've been sold American exceptionalism,
Yeah, sure.
we believe that we're 4.5% of the world in terms of population. We get the sense that we're much, 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 much more. We're not.
Mhm.
I think that we get the sense that we would be much, 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 much more than 18% of the world GDP. I really do.
Yeah.
So when President Trump and his team um, initiate this policy,
Right.
I've heard many supporters say, "Well, he can do this." I'm like, "Wait a minute, it's not that simple, is it?"
Well, maybe he can do it. The question is whether it's a good idea,
Okay.
right? This reminds me of other stuff, right? Like you can cheat on your spouse, but it may not be a good idea. You can cheat on your taxes, but it may not be a good idea, right? You can cheat at work and do less work or ask for more money, but that's not a good idea morally or efficiency wise, right? So, like, there are things people can do, but just because you could possibly do something doesn't necessarily mean you should do it. That's not very calibrated, right?
Hmm. Well, Paula Garcina Zipser, one of my founding morning stars, says Mark Cuban advised today to go to Walgreens or CVS, as well as other stores, to buy as much toothpaste and soap because these items will skyrocket. And Chaparral says tissue, water, rice, beans, sugar, flour, oil, toiletries, washing powder. Now we're about to see, for people who have a little extra money, run on the stores because there
Yeah.
are fears that we're not going to be able to afford uh, anything next week. Oh my goodness! Guess who we have here? Well, we've got your dear friend Congressman Jonathan Jackson with us.
Oh, hey,
Hey, Brother Max, how are you, sir?
how are
Hey,
you?
Santita.
How are you, Congressman Jackson?
Are you
Excellent in
racing to
yourself.
buy the toilet paper and the water and the toothpaste before everyone else in your vehicle now? That's not a good sign.
I know, right? I guess I need to get my avocados before they come out of Mexico, my
Well,
strawberries, my lumber before it comes out of Canada, and my munchie-based crude oil from
Yeah.
uh, from their planes. Time to stockpile.
what is it?
People are already raising prices.
But is it time to stockpile, Congressman?
Yes, yes. I mean, well, whatever you can afford to hold, you'll save 25, 50%.
25 or 50%?
I said you'll save two. Yeah, all depends on what the item is. I think it's
I
what
mean, I do think
50%
there's
now
different
upon
answers, right?
Chinese made
There's
goods. Santina, it's all so bad. they're going to have to unwind and backtrack a lot of stuff. You're going to see manufacturing come to a halt. If this is an economic plan, you've got to plan it out like 3, 5 years. Are they going to hold the tariffs, or is this something he's doing to threaten someone? Like, what is exactly the end goal? He should come before the Congress, should share it with the senators. This shouldn't be a secret. Let's say if he does have good intentions, share your big idea. We're all grown people. We want to be in the conversation, but he keeps it close to the vest, has a small group, and then they think they're the best and brightest, and they come up and do things that have totally unintended consequences if they meant good. But if they're just trying to be bullies, and everybody wants to be rich, people like to be secure and comfortable, but their goal is Greenland, we're going to make everybody rich. You're going to be so rich and so forth. Not everybody has those ambitions, but people would like to have enough food, enough housing, and enough safety and security and opportunities for their children. He's trying to make the world in his image, and it's going to have a lot of rejection.
So think that most of the time trade wars, first of all, trade wars have a habit historically of becoming actual wars, which is disturbing, right? Because when you attack a person's livelihood, they feel threatened. I mean, it's hard to argue that one. And so if you start to make people wonder, can I get through the next week, the next month, the next year? Can I take care of my family? People react very angrily because it's a pretty heavy hit to them, right? I do think there's a social answer though and a private answer. So running out and hoarding things does push up prices and create insecurities on its own, even when it does make sense for people and they might face higher prices in the future. That's real. I think separate apart from that, there's a sense of insecurity, and there's a sense for a lot of people, and Congressman Jackson will have more insight to this because he talks to his constituents and thinks about them all the time. But I mean, there's a sense for people that all the things they kind of counted on in their life aren't there, right? That government job, that certain kind of minimum functionality from the leadership, certain kind of patriotism, a certain kind of taking care of a veteran or taking care of somebody who's disabled out of no fault of their own and stuff like that. We didn't have much of a safety net anyway. But to lose the safety net and the sense of prosperity and the sense of trust in the government and the sense of checks and balances, I mean, I think the general public, I think all these ideas, whether they like it or not, are silly. I think the general public is in shock. And I think people are limping from crisis to crisis right now, trying to figure out how to be least hurt among their group. Right. And I understand that. Right. But at some
Oh,
point, people have to have a sense of security. That's the first job of government, and sense of meeting the necessities. Because I agree, a lot of people want to get rich. I work in finance, and so there's a few folks who are motivated by money around me at any given moment. Believe it or not, it's not all God's work here in New York. But that notwithstanding, it's impossible for a society to plan for success if it can't do the minimum. Right. And the minimum is kind of make people feel like somebody who cares a little bit about them is making decisions, that they've been thought through, that the experts have been consulted. Right. And that at least they won't be worse off. I mean, it's almost a sort of Hippocratic oath from the government sense like, hey, we're going to try to change things to make them better. And you never know exactly what tomorrow brings. But we've really given our best to make sure it isn't worse. It isn't worse for you. It isn't harder to fill the bag of groceries. It isn't harder to get to the end of the month. It isn't harder to plan for tomorrow. Right. And I think like we failed that test pretty tremendously of late. Last thing to think about is $3 trillion in wealth was destroyed in the stock market today. That's a lot of 401ks. That's a lot of nest eggs. That's a lot of retirement planning. That's a lot of how I'm going to send myself or my kid to school and how I'm going to take care of my mom when she's sick or how we're going to take care of somebody else or give to a charity that means the world to me or retire early. That's a lot of best laid plans and hard won savings trashed predictably by a plan, which again, it's very hard to get us economists to agree, right? The old joke being everyone wants a one-armed economist because it's always on this hand and on that hand, right? Like, but to bring all the economists together to think your idea is terrible, it's kind of an achievement of sorts. The same way it's an achievement of sorts to have Japan, South Korea, and China standing together and responding to your tariffs, or all the nations of the EU, who have had a difficult time, always getting along on economic policy matters, to bring them together. It's kind of amazing, actually.
And Dr. Wolf, I agree 100% with what you said. And some of the words, and words have matter, as the president said. Uh, we've been robbed. He says we've been raped. Like, whoa, whoa. I mean, those words hit different people different ways. And we've gone from seeing this exhibition on the White House lawn of a used car salesman slot to selling
I
off
think those
of.
vehicles were new, Congressman.
Okay, I can't tell. Every time I call, every time I call an Uber, if they send a
Yeah.
Tesla, I hit cancel. It's like I don't want to have nothing to do with that man. Okay, well, from my point of view, they look used and tired. Nobody wants to resell on them, and then he wants to sell sponsorship for the Easter egg to find another way to make a profit out of there. His children want to start a stable coin, another way to make a profit. I mean, it just doesn't stop. I mean, and then he ends up with talking about these tariffs that are so poorly and ill conceived that they just absolutely make no sense. And so today you're going to
Yeah.
see the cost of housing go up, the cost of automobiles go up, the cost of road work goes up. So it's going to hit everyone's pocket. The poorer people making less than 45,000. The next bracket making less than 85,000. The least shock, of course, are the people that make the most. Um, and this is going to backfire on them miserably. Do I think something needs to be done? Absolutely. But you don't have to do it in the middle of the night. You can have a conversation. There are adults in the room. There are many capable people in the Senate, both Democrat and Republican, that would share this goal. I mean, everybody wants to root out waste, fraud, and abuse. We're there on that. But you just don't make things up, and they don't exist with these, as you've seen, Dr. Wolf, these AI generated reports that are putting a tax on islands that are inhabited only by penguins, saying they've taken advantage of us in trade deals. It's silly. And
Yeah,
it's
well, I mean,
embarrassing.
there were
And
seals there as well. There were also
yeah,
seals there.
and let me tell you, Santita, it's impossible to invest in this environment. I
Yeah,
mean, you can
sure.
scalp and take a few trades and make a little money where you see a discrepancy. Like if I were in the market now, I would go buy 3 or 4 cars and just hold them for a month and then sell them and make 10 grand each because the car prices are going to go up because the components are going up. That just happened. You can see it. It's happening today as we speak. And clothes prices are going up that are coming in from China. The produce prices are going up that's coming in from Mexico. So yeah, you're gonna have a lot of people hurt in a very short period of time.
Yeah, and I also think we've cut some of those government services that help people when they are hurt. So it's a bit of a 1-2 punch, right? If you expose people to all kinds of uncertainty and some sort of economic trauma, and then remove the coping mechanisms we've historically had in place to help a bit, it's a tough combination. And the other thing is, even if this is unwound tomorrow and partially reinstated the next day, and then brought back in a fit of anger against this country or canceled on that country. Again, we don't know the path ahead, but you can't plan that, right? You really can't plan that if you're a business person, right? You can't add employees if you don't know what market they face, right? You can't figure out what tomorrow brings. The insurer is going to panic and jack up the insurance rates. Then the last thing is, sometimes the tail does wag the dog. I guess that's why we go to graduate school for so long in economics, not just to raw fun of it, but yeah, you do learn a few things, right? It's a little bit like the doctors. So I had a friend who's also an economist today, and he, I think, has gone around on the public selling the story, but it's a good one. He said, "Today I understand how the doctors felt when he told everyone to drink bleach." Because they're going to ask us all day, should you drink bleach? And of course, yeah, you don't really need a doctor to tell you not to do that. You don't really need an economist to tell you not to alienate all your trading partners, right? Like if you have an employee and they call all of your major clients and tell them that they're a bag of crap on a Tuesday morning, that guy is not working there on Wednesday,
Hey,
right?
Dr.
It's
Wolf,
just,
and did you see him out in front of the White House with the I don't know if that's let's make a deal, Wheel of Fortune board.
yeah,
He's just going through all of these things in a gusty wind.
yeah,
Like, are you are you
yeah.
are you kidding me?
I'm all
and
for
so,
jokes. I like jokes, but jokes aren't jokes if they hurt people's lives, right?
Yeah.
yep,
If there's crying around around the dinner table tonight, if there's decisions about who's going to go to college and can they go to college, and who's going to retire and can they go to college, get retired, and who's going to go get a medical procedure that they need but doesn't get fully covered, like those things stop being funny, right? And I have a pretty expansive sense of humor, so like I don't
yes,
think
you do.
uptight fellow out there. If anything, the critiques have often come in that it's too expansive as opposed to not expansive enough. But yeah, look, it's just a sad moment for America too. And I think one thing that people don't realize is this is a catastrophic blow to America's standing in the world. And again, you may not travel. You may not think about or much about the rest of the world. But remember, 95.5% of the world's population and 82% of the world's GDP, and growing on both, right, lives outside this country. And you don't really live in a separate economy. It's just too far to see. You live in an integrated global economy, and that integrated global economy put underpants on your butt and coffee in your cup and sugar in that cup, right? And built that car. And we don't have a separate economy. We're free to think about it separately, right? And I'm not trying to offend anyone's sensibilities, but there was a time where people thought body and soul were unrelated. And over time, that sort of faded. The notion that there's a sort of connection between people and what you think and what your body looks like and what you believe and how you live on this earth and how long you live on this earth and stuff like that. It turns out, it wasn't good for anyone to think of these things as separate. America doesn't have a separate economy from the rest of the world, because an economy is interaction between people buying, selling, distributing things, and that's very global. And we just spent 50 years, 70 years globalizing, sometimes at the end of a gun barrel, right? Sometimes we said, this is the rules and we're going to go the globalization route, or you're going to be sanctioned, or possibly worse. So this is the temple we built that we're knocking the walls down on our own heads. And that's a strange decision, even though anger and disappointment about way things work is real, comes from a place of earnest wanting for a better world, which I can respect. This just doesn't seem like the best cure. The analogy I've overused today, so whatever, to share it once again, is maybe you need to leave. Maybe your friend needs to leave. Maybe they need to get out of your house or the apartment they're in, but you didn't do them much favor if you burned it to the ground. You got to sit there and do the slow, patient work of convincing them to move and finding them a new house. Burning it to the ground, it might satisfy an urge and anger, and that even might be reasonable, but it's a mediocre long-term plan.
Well, see, my question for both of you is what do people do in the short term? You have Social Security. They have fired half the agency, closed the offices. Are people going to get their checks? What do people do? Now you have people who have a little bit of money who are going to do a run on the stores to get toilet paper and things and essentials because they might not be able to afford them in a few weeks, next month, 2 months from now. I mean, what are people to do in the short term? Congressman, I mean, what are people supposed to do?
Well, you brace yourself because there's going to be an economic shock. And so that's one good piece of information you can give people. The prices are going to go up. So tighten your belts up. That's the first thing you can tell people. The second thing I would tell you is you have to resist. This man is going off of executive orders. The first stage of fighting tyranny is to resist. I was at an event earlier today, and as I've shared with you, we've started in the Congress a diversity, equity, and inclusion caucus. And if you let me explain for one moment, those are inspirational, but more importantly, aspirational words. Diversity, e pluribus unum. Out of many, we are one. We're a nation of people that have come here from many different countries, from Indians, Native Americans that were killed, to Africans that have been kidnapped, to people that sought refuge from religious persecution and other things. And so now the country settled a quarter of a century later, but we celebrate that. And we talk about equality. Who can be against equality and having an equal chance, not equal outcomes, but having a level playing field? And who can be against accessibility? People that have needs for an elevator or a wheelchair ramp. These things have made America better. So when you say you're against DEI, it's not a law, it's an aspiration. So to say you're are now going against fraudulent, wasteful, illegal, and immoral DEI. Well, yeah, you should be against things that are immoral and illegal. So you should continue to support DEI. Just don't do anything illegal or immoral. So he's like making his own definition out of this. And keep in mind, and that's Students for Fair Admission, that the United States military academies and the Army had weighed in with their amicus brief saying that we need diversity, we need affirmative action. Colin Powell is an affirmative action candidate. We continue to attract students and young leaders when they can see themselves in leadership. And the Supreme Court and Students for Fair Admission granted them an exception. So there's the big door is wide open. The Biden administration never argued the case. They never appealed. So we've not been represented. We've not taken the fight to the courts.
Why
So
didn't
as
they
an
appeal it? Why didn't
that's
they
a good
appeal it?
question. I don't know. I'm just thinking of the level of gross insensitivity or cowardice, but they capitulated and did nothing. When they could have done something, they could have at least made an appeal. They did not. That's why, let me take my hat off to the Honorable Senator Cory Booker. I mean, he goes to show you the power of one United States senator. He shut it down. He could absolutely do that. Schumer could have shut it down,
Yes,
not giving this man all of his uh, cabinet nominees when he told you the Attorney General of the United States works for me. The United States Senate could have grilled her, do you work for us or for him? And they let her go. And so now he's got the military, got the top judiciary official that are now working for him, and now they're weaponizing these. They're using that law department to go after law firms. Currently, he's extracted $250 million in services from law firms. 250 million. Is that for us or is that for him personally? And many of these law firms do a lot of great pro bono work for all kind of nonprofits in their community. Well, they're not going to be able to do anything for anyone because they're servicing him. It's just absolutely wrong. So again, thank Senator Booker. And last point I want to make on that, Santita, is affirmative action is not over. It is legal in the United States military. So there's a huge contradiction. If it's good for the classrooms, why can't it be good for the boardrooms? It's
we
good for
just
the
find out
classrooms
today.
in the military, and that's why we started this. We're continuing it, and then when he tells France just this past week, you have to get rid of all your DEI programs, and the French government says you cannot dictate to us within our country, and they have laws on the books. They don't measure race, but they do for gender, and 40%, I think, of the boards and all that have to have females. So they've gone on and evaluated and elevated their stakes towards a more equitable society. And so I spoke with the French ambassador. I applauded him, congratulated him. But ironically, we're making our world smaller, not bigger. And you're going to see a huge contraction in the United States economy. Hard time.
Oh my goodness. Well, he said that we're going to see a huge contraction in the economy. What does he mean by that,
I
Dr.
mean,
Moore?
I don't want to speak for him if he has a temporary cell phone
Well,
disruption, but I mean,
yeah.
look,
What does
the
well? Let me
idea
just ask you then. What does that mean?
to me, it means two things. We were already well into sort of shock and awe policy around the federal government, which is 26%, about one in every $4 of the US economy. So that already sent a shock wave into the economy that will have a contractionary impact. Obviously, it won't be 26% because the cuts were much smaller, but it'll be meaningful. It'll ramify through. It'll be all kinds of cuts. If you add to that, about another 25% of the US economy is international trade, you're talking about a massive potential for a recession, right? You're also talking about a dislocation. And remember, whether we like it or not, the global economy, as built largely, not in any way alone, but largely by the United States, feeds, clothes, medicates, and shelters 8 billion people.
Oh,
No one can afford this to kind of go off the rails, and we hope it won't, but it will travel more uphill, slower, and reach fewer people with its deliveries for these policies. Again, I don't know how long they last, right? Because things tend to be reiterated. There was already some communication tonight, perhaps just based on the catastrophe of the equity markets today, but there's some suggestion of possible adjustment to some of these policies, right? So again, I don't know where we'll end up. My point is that chaos is an enemy of prosperity. Even if we end up with a less offensive version of this in 3 days, we won't know even then what the final version will be. And we'll know the following: we will be less prestigious, poorer, and weaker. Right? I'm just going to tell you the same thing I tell everybody, which is often in life, one chooses between looking strong or being strong. Right? If you always choose looking strong, you end up being weak. Another thing I can tell you as an economist is these policies aren't controversial. There isn't a constituency in a debate. That's not true. There's near consensus that this is a bad idea. Like there was about the bleach and the shining the flashlight, up your rear. The number of folks who thought that was a good idea were very small, and they're probably dead now. In that case, if they actually did it, right? Which is, to me, it's always a bad sign if the people who take a series of advice are dead pretty quickly thereafter. Again, this is not just as a professional economist; it's been something I've noticed throughout my life. But in any case, yeah, these are not controversial, right? But I would say what I think people never do in the United States, which is how we got here, is look to each other to get through it. You need the people around you. You need a community more than ever. And it's harder to have now and more essential. You can't do this alone. It can't be you against the world. It's a nice idea. Maybe it makes for a good action movie, but it makes for a terribly unsuccessful human existence. Lonely and disenfranchised, right? You need to look to your people to suffer together and to find strength in each other, because you're not going to get that strength of leadership right away, maybe from your president, right? I mean, I don't want to be unfair. Maybe some people will find it in the actions in a place I didn't, but I don't. It doesn't look like it's coming to me. That doesn't mean all politicians, right? I mean, I'm not saying this. There's lots of people out there doing hard work for a lot of risk and for no immediate upside. Like, let's honor them, like you did with Senator Booker, right? But he isn't alone. There's other people out there fighting the good fight, and they need you to support them, and you need them. Let's all do it alone. Doesn't work, right? It doesn't work, it's particularly risky to go it alone at a time of need, right? And look, I'm just excited that everyone will be fighting to wipe themselves with a coffee filter. That's that prosperity we were promised. Like, I'm excited. I know what my
Hey.
kids are getting for Christmas: an egg for next year. I'm going to buy it now while it's cheap, and we'll just save it up. But
Hey,
I'm hopeful that
and
I'm hopeful that their appetite is suppressed by their measles.
oh Jesus, you ought to stop it. Hey, Wolf. One of the things that I find interesting in that last issue that they had China, U.S. and a bit of a trade standoff. In that time period, the Chinese made the decision because they were buying the United States. Illinois in specific is like the third largest exporter of the corn and soybean, and 50% of that was on its way to China. And after we got into the last trade dispute, guess what? They found another country that has more arable land than the United States. That's Brazil. Brazil, land mass wise, is larger than the United States, and it has great tropical landscape. So the Chinese started investing in Brazil. The Illinois farm growers never recovered from that loss of the market share.
Yeah.
And the same thing is happening now. He is now, as Dr. Wolf said so eloquently, 95.5% of the world is outside of the United States, and 88, 87% or 88% of the world's economy is outside of the United States.
A lot
They
of
are
it.
going to be forced into creating new relationships. So
They're
by
already
the
doing
time
it.
when this tariff is over, be it a day, a week, a month, or a year, or 5 years, people would have gathered some new relationship. There was an old blues song for the guys that went away to war, and they came back and they went to the bar to try to find their girlfriend, and the songwriter written, "Jody's got your girl and gone."
I knew you were going to say that.
and so, and so by the time we go back to
Sure.
trying to find these relationships, that country, that other trading group, Jody would have gotten her, be it another trading block, and they would have created a new relationship where they're going to treat them better, and they will be gone.
Yeah.
Everyone, my brother loves Johnny Taylor, just so that you know.
Yes. And then there was another song that touches my heart. I think the Jones Girl had when I thought of this tariff going up, and they're
Come on.
forcing people to trade with other people. And the
Yeah,
girl makes such an impassioned plea in that song. She says, "You're going to make me
make me
love
love somebody
somebody else."
else. If you keep on doing me the way you do, I don't
That's
want to do it. I don't want to do it.
so, so we are forcing people into new relationships, and having
Yeah,
somebody is better than nobody. Okay.
yeah, yeah. For
Oh.
for a lot of people, one of the odd things about a modern economy is you're dependent and intimately reliant on people all over the world you don't know about. So if somebody else cuts that line, right,
Mm.
your connection is still pretty important to you. And again, most of the things we produce and export have imports in them. And last thing I'll say is blaming things on foreigners is a popular political move, right, left, center, foreign and domestic. But doing that also has this one big problem with it because it's not what's wrong.
Mm.
So if you traumatize people with big issues and big changes, but they're not productive to solve the problem, then you end up with the trauma and not the gain, right? So illegal immigrants were not the reason that America has labor compensation problems. In some cases, they contribute, many they don't. They're not the issue. They're just not. I mean, it makes people feel good, but we know it's not true. They're not the issue. Our foreign trade partners, there are issues, and there are some communities that have been hit pretty hard by foreign trade, but generally it's not the issue, right? And so if we use our time and our treasure, right, and our risk tolerance and our trauma tolerance to solve the problems that aren't our real problems, then we don't have bandwidth and capability to tackle the real problems. And America does need change, and America does have real problems. And big portions of our middle class have slid into poverty, and big portions of our impoverished communities have slid into desperate poverty. And we do have climate change to worry about, and we do have drug issues to worry about, and drug addiction and substance abuse issues. And we have a lot of cities to rebuild and infrastructure to rebuild. We don't have any shortage of real things that need real change and real money. And when we're spending money on something else, we're doubling down on keeping those problems. And that's sort of half the tragedy, right? To me, or maybe more than half, right? And if people went from whatever they were worried about yesterday to hoarding toilet paper, there's not much way to think they're better off, right? I mean, obviously, you don't want to be the guy who was the last one, I guess, to the store, but it's not a great recipe for future change. And it also highlights that there's individual solutions, but hoarding and running on the shelves is also not good for people because it does make things expensive, and it does disproportionately hit poor people who are not in a position to go buy 2 months of toilet paper, right? And so they're left in the most fragile position imaginable.
So just what happens to the poor? I mean, this is catastrophic. We talk about the middle class. We talk about the upper middle class. We talk about Congressman Jackson talked about the difference. People who make less than 45,000, then less than 85,000. That hey, most Americans don't make $45,000 a year.
Yeah.
So what?
Also,
So
a lot
what
of
about them?
Americans just got fired, right? So their
Uh,
income just went way down, right? Because they were let go, and sometimes it's not 100% clear why or if this was thought through and stuff like that, right? Yeah.
I don't know. And someone said that our brother, correctional officer for the lockdown, praying for your granddaughter. He said he used to pick our brother Jesse up from O'Hare, and he always wanted to go to Harold's in Hyde Park. Come on, Harold's in Hyde Park. We love it. Whoop whoop on 53rd Street. Remember that chicken car? Okay, enough. But I mean, the most vulnerable are
Yeah.
in a horrible spot today. I mean, people are looking at their 401ks. You really need to be at a certain income level to even think about that. I
Sure.
mean, people, if you cannot afford toilet tissue, Congressman Jackson, I mean, and you're in the lower house of Congress, you're in the people's house. You all have the power of the purse. Is there anything that you can do? I've got about 3 more minutes before I have to. Well, I can go to another part of the show, but please. What can you all
At
do?
this moment, Tita, we can win the House seats back. There were close elections, and Um,
In
Florida,
Florida.
which was a good thing, but number two doesn't count. There was a victory in the uh, Wisconsin that was tremendous. What's happened now, there's a new rhythm. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, Santita, the new rhythm now is you used to go through census and then reapportionment to determine which states had how many representatives, and now it ended up with redistricting. And the redistricting after the census and reapportionment used to take every 10 years. Now it's happening every 2 years. There is a lawsuit that's being filed
Now
to
it's happening.
redraw
How often you dropped? How
every
it's
two
going?
Every
years.
2 years.
Wow.
Every 2 years. Like there's a change in the middle of the decade right now. And so my dear friend, your friend, our friend, Congressman Cleo Fields, he just won his seat back that he lost or had been gerrymandered, redistricted out by David Dukes about 17 years ago. We know there's better than 30% African American in the state of Louisiana, probably 40, 50%. Everybody down
Mhm.
there is mixed. And what did they do? David Dukes took him and says there shouldn't be two African Americans maximizing representation in the state of Louisiana. So he went back to the Senate and then the state Senate. Now he's back in the Congress. Got sworn in as of January 3rd. So now there are two African Americans out of six that are represented from the state of Louisiana. This past Monday, a week ago, the Supreme Court took his case back up again, Louisiana versus Callis. So the second uh, majority minority district in the state of Louisiana is back on trial. The Voting Rights Act, 60 years after it was passed, is back on trial. The bad part of that is nothing good can come out of it if it gets if it gets if the Supreme Court touches it. Inevitably they're going to weaken it. They're not going to strengthen it. And then if they decide to gut it and say it's invalid altogether, you can see half of the Hispanic caucus and half of the Black caucus go away.
Wow.
And so that is huge. And it's the biggest story that's not being talked about right now. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 is on trial again. So that is something I'm full time focused on with DEI to let people know continue your good work. This is now being adjudicated at the state level, but continue doing your good work. Don't do a self check. Don't stop it. Well, in anticipation, I thought that's what they meant. No, also cite the Students for Fair Admission. It's legal in the military schools. It just hadn't been litigated. We had not fought it. And that's your defense. So
Mm.
go forward with the programs. They're honorable. It's decent work. And like Trump says, he's against the illegal and immoral use of DEI. Good. Stay away from all things illegal and immoral, but you can have DEI, those aspirational words to bring about equality and opportunity for all.
Dr. Wolf, we have 1 more minute.
Yeah, look, I think if we want to feel strong, to me, we're not going to do very well apart. We're not going to do very well divided, right? We need to stay unified. And if you're angry at where things ended up, that's fine. Let's talk about it. But randomly slashing and breaking things to feel powerful, understandable, but that's a riot, not a protest. There's a difference, right? And it's almost always your neighborhood you're burning. And people are relying on that. And so stop burning your own neighborhood. Find a way to get through this together, right? Because you will not succeed otherwise. You're not going to outsmart the tectonic shifts of the global economy. It's just not going to happen, right? And you're not going to survive without a community. It's a lot to get through, right? It's a lot to get through pandemics and recessions and challenged elections and lost jobs and lost services. And I think maybe, I learned from your dad in the end, lost hope. It's pretty hard to keep people doing hard work if they don't have hope about where it's going to go, right? And I do think as soon as you feel defeated, as soon as you feel like there's no hope, that becomes true because you got to keep working so other people can keep working. And like the last thing I'd say is I think that the interdependence is inevitable, but it doesn't have to be threatening. just like I think the diversity. America's simply diverse. So if our institutions aren't diverse, they don't reflect us. And that's the end of democracy because we're a diverse lot. And you can like it or not, it kind of doesn't much matter at this point. It is what it is. We are a diverse lot. We are white and we are black and we are Hispanic and we are Asian and we are Christian and Muslim and Jewish and we are young and old and firm and infirm and veterans and all the rest. So if you reject those principles, you simply reject your fellow Americans and you reject the promise of democracy, the promise of a better America. I don't really think it has anything to do with how you feel about diversity. It's whether or not you're willing to embrace what is America.
Mm.
Right.
Well,
So to me, it's not too patriotic to reject this country because everyone doesn't look like you or everyone doesn't fit into your historical notion of what is American. And the last thing I guess I'd say, because I'm still the crusty old professor, is your opinion about American history should be addled by the facts.
I love that.
I love that.
Let it get in there and mix around. Maybe the gumbo will be a little richer. It's worth a shot.
Congressman, you want to give it a shot?
Hey, thank you. Love you, Santita. Love your great work, Max. Love you. Appreciate
Likewise.
your brilliance, Santita. Keep doing the great things. I listened to you. I learned so much. You keep it going, girl. You're the bomb.
So do
And
I.
you-
And even
and,
though your guest today was terrible, your show usually has really decent, honorable folks.
Venmo, Jonathan, Congressman, look at your Venmo. I'm sending you that money. Thank you.
Oh,
Do
there
it,
you
girl.
go. Looks like you're picking up a few extra rolls. All right, thanks, guys.
I
Thank
love
you.
you.
All right,
Talk soon.
Santita.
A pleasure. Thank you.
All right,
Bye-bye.
Love you.
Bye-bye.
Oh, AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. Bye, everybody. Love you.